Good morning. Welcome to Corporate Coffee Q&A. Surprise, surprise. I am trying something new where I am reaching folks in the morning to have an opportunity as you're heading into work. Maybe you're about to start applying to opportunities. Maybe you got the day off today. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, welcome. This is your opportunity to have Q&A with me. My name is Beverly. I am a chief operating officer and your chief empowerment officer. And I want to chat and have some Q&A today. So really this is an opportunity for community members to, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Instagram, feel free to ask questions. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to see everybody. And I want to kick off with a couple of just highlights as we get started. As a reminder, if you would like to work with me directly, you can. A lot of folks don't know that you can literally meet with me. I met with a community member this morning who recently found my page. And so, if you would like to work together, I have all different opportunities and resources available to you through my website at beverlydines.com. You can grab it at the link in bio or the link in description if you are on YouTube watching. If you are looking for an opportunity, if you're looking to grow in your role, if you're an executive trying to, enhance best practices at your organization, I have so many. I've got classes, I've got resources, I've got kits. But most importantly, if you would like to work with me directly, I encourage you book an empowerment session with me so that we can have some one-on-one time no matter what it is you're experiencing. It could be anything between resume support, LinkedIn support, or job pivots. Maybe you're navigating a pit, maybe you're navigating a career change. If you're a recent graduate, wherever you are, I also have package options as well if you want to dive right in and work with me directly. All of my offerings are payment plan eligible for as much accessibility as possible. Um, good morning, good morning, good morning. I wanted to just jump on today. Like I said before, try something new. I have Beverly's Break Room every night, almost every night at 6 p.m. So if you've already started to tune into those, thank you for being there. But I also wanted to, check in with folks who are um, uh, here in the morning and maybe want some morning joe to start their day. Um, I'm going to open it up to the floor. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know as we go on this journey together. But also, before, while I wait for questions from the community, I'm going to pull up a question here that I got from the audience the other day. One moment. This is a question that I got that I wanted to kick us off with. That I thought was really, really appropriate. If you are somebody who is tired of playing the corporate game, you're tired of, playing if you're somebody who is tired of playing the corporate game, my biggest piece of advice for you is to decide that you no longer want to and figure out what that next pivot strategy is for you. I have a ton of advice as to how to interact with the corporate games and how to win the corporate game. So if you want to win, then I have separate content for you that I can share as well. But if you are like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired of folks playing with me, I'm tired of the lack of security, I'm tired of the layoffs, I'm tired of the games, hopefully, or maybe you don't, that there is a pathway outside of this, that you don't have to play those games anymore. Over 600,000 Black women have been removed from the workforce, and a lot of them have started their own organizations. They've started to scale their own consultancy agencies. They've started to build their own businesses, create their own doors. And I can't stress enough that if you are somebody who's like, I don't want to be in this rat race anymore, you don't have to be. You can create your own opportunities. And if you are looking for a tactical guide to be able to create your own opportunities so you don't have to play the corporate game anymore, my book, Create the Door, is a great um opportunity for you to get a tactical guide that will not only support you with whatever pivots you have going on, but also it provides like step by step. So if you're like, yeah, Beverly, I want to pivot, but I don't know how or I don't know what steps to take, Create the Door is a resource that I wrote last year. It's a book that I'm going to share my screen so that you can take a look here. It's available on Amazon as well as my website, beverlydines.com. If you're looking for a step by step guide, it is here and available to you. Create the Door is the methodology and system that I used to pivot in over 11 industries and in so many different fields, and it's the tactical guide within which I was able to do so, as well as balance my passions. You're talking to somebody who is a actor, who is a singer, who is all these other things, and I was able to maintain those things while scaling and climbing the corporate ladder. So that is it right now for pitches. But going back to the question at hand, Beverly, is there any advice that I have for those who are trying to interact with these corporate games? Well, I have a ton of advice. I think the first thing is, what type of game are you looking to play? As a chief operating officer, I knew that my goal was to be a C suite by the time I was 30. And I did achieve that goal. And because I knew very plainly what that goal was, I had a system for myself where I knew that it was important for me to get mentorship from senior leaders. It was important for me to focus my time and energy on maximizing my time with as many different departments as I could, because I knew that as a COO, I'd be responsible for a plethora of different departments as well as being a connector within them, right? So I can't empathize with departments if I are not familiar with them. And so I knew what the game was that I was going to be playing. So if you are somebody who is trying to really grow within your career in the corporate space, wherever you are, whatever field that is, whether you're working in education, whether you're working in, nonprofit, whether you ever, people have this, in my opinion, people have a very incorrect notion as to what corporate is, because corporate is seen as a very specific type of business to work in. But if I'm going to be honest with you, especially in 2026, everything is corporate. Everything is playing a corporate game. They're just in different fonts. There's politics in higher education. There's politics in healthcare. There's politics in elementary through high school education. There's politics in manufacturing. There's politics in construction. There's politics in every industry. And so you may label something as corporate and it's a very specific industry, maybe, but really every single industry has politic. So if you are trying to win the corporate game, you have to first start asking yourself, what game am I trying to play? What is the end goal? What does winning look like for me? The second element of this question that they asked is, should I let people know to play with their mama, not me, or is it just best to walk away from disrespect? If you are experiencing disrespect in the workplace, there's a lot of ways that you can navigate that while also telling folks that you're not to be played with. The first way to make sure that it's really clear is through documentation. I talk about this a lot on my platform because documentation really is a major gap that I do not see a lot of employees consistently instilling, because A, maybe they don't realize that it's available to them, that they can document what they're experiencing to identify those patterns and self advocate. But B, maybe folks don't realize that yes, it may be exhausting to keep notes in your phone or document when you get home situations that you're experiencing at work, but have to remember that it is your word against your supervisors. It is always your word against the system, right? And so if you have documentation with data, with witnesses, with dates, with times, with patterns, that is going to be formidable when you are advocating for yourself and when you are trying to ensure that they know on paper that you're not to be played with. But in person, right? What do you do when you have to navigate pettiness? What do you do when you have to navigate folks who are immature or are coworkers who maybe, have never maybe been clocked before and they've never had somebody come to them correct? Well, in those situations, right, you always have to think about what is the safest way for you to set those boundaries really clearly. In my experience, I am somebody who likes to have behind closed doors conversations. If somebody is talking crazy to me or being disrespectful, I'm first going to address that in person. I'm going to say, "Hey, listen, we're both adults. Like, what's happening here?" And if they try to, rebuke me or say that it's not what I'm thinking it is, gaslighting, right? Like a lot of folks do, I'll be like, "Okay, well, this is the first attempt at me warning you that I'm not to be played with." After a while, I will always bring either leadership in. People always talk about bringing HR into this space, but you and I both know that if you're bringing HR into this space, HR is going to protect the company. They're always going to protect the company. And so I don't actually tend to bring HR in until after I've already had a conversation with leadership, after I've had a conversation with their leadership, if it's relevant, depending on the situation, because I want there to be an extensive documentation trail that I did everything I could to rectify this as an adult myself, with best practices before I had to get HR involved, because I understand the severity of getting HR involved. So before you feel that inclination to be like, you know what, whatever, I'm just going to walk away, I'm just going to do whatever. I can't stress enough, like put those systems in place where you're going to check them respectfully, professionally, behind closed doors with leadership, with whomever, then bring it to HR. And then you can decide, you know what, if this is something I don't want to deal with anymore, I'm either going to make the plans I need to get out of this situation, or I'm going to, avoid this person or avoid this situation. So, that's definitely something I recommend. And also, if you are watching from Instagram, um, if you have questions, definitely let me know. I see a questions come in here. Um, let's see. Hey, y'all. Good morning. Definitely share your questions if you have them. Um, but yeah, so definitely, only walk away if you feel like it's something that um, you know, you've exhausted all avenues and you have documentation that you've done so. I'm gonna pull up another question here. All right. So someone here asked, is it me, or now are would now people rather move to another company with higher pay, same position, instead of getting promoted within that same company and more responsibility for an extra pay increase? If you are somebody who is looking to be promoted at work, I need you to know, if you are somebody who wants to be promoted at work, I need you to recognize that in order to grow up, you have to grow out. As a COO, one of the best pieces of feedback I ever received in my entire career was from a senior leader very early. I was in graduate school. So this was before I even entered the corporate space. A senior leader asked me, Beverly, what are your goals? I told him I want to be a COO by the time I'm 30. And he said, that's ambitious, but I believe you can do it. One thing that is really important to you to remember, though, is that in order to grow up, you have to grow out. I asked him, what does that mean? Because, I was always taught, and especially, my parents were taught, so many of us were taught that you get to a company, if they're treating you well, they give you good compensation, give you good benefits, you grow within that organization and you reach as high as you can before you leave because of gaps and all of this. And he goes, huh, no, there's a reason why the average CEO, at least at that time, was in a role for 18 months. There's a reason why leaders shift companies very quickly, because there's an understanding that if you stay at a company for too long, that prohibits you from having higher pay increases. It prohibits you from title increases. It prohibits a lot. But on top of that, organizations know, we understand that if you are sticking around at an organization and you haven't been promoted, you haven't um been scaled, right? There's this bias that occurs where they expect, well, they're not going to go anywhere, and so why continue to develop that person versus the person who has a personal brand, who's been moving up quickly, who has moved up quickly in other organizations. Those companies know that those people aren't going to settle. They may try you, they may try to see if you'll stick around for a long time, but if your goal is to increase your salary, there are some studies that support that you can increase your salary if you move every 2 years by 30 to 65% each time, including titles. So if you are somebody who wants to be who wants higher pay, if you're somebody who wants a higher salary, you got to leave these companies. You got to stop staying at these organizations 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. Gone are the days of people staying at organizations for super long periods of time. If the goal is to grow quickly, if the goal is to have higher pay, if the goal is to have better paying titles. And yes, even in this hiring market, people are making these shifts. The best thing that you can do is while you're at an organization, use the quote unquote stability, because you and I both know that stability is fictitious these days, but you use that stability to network with your inner community, to petition yourself for conference opportunities, speaking engagements. Maybe you start a Substack or a Medium page where you are talking about your best practices. Maybe you are create an article where you are discussing um uh the specific knowledge leadership that you have. Use that as an opportunity to bank certain skill sets so that when you are ready to transition or an opportunity comes your way, you're willing and able to pick that up quickly instead of waiting for your company to do that for you. Because if you're somebody who wants to transition internally, I need you to stress that there is a methodology behind it's cheaper to keep them, meaning if you're growing internally, they're not going to give you the same raise that they're going to give somebody else who's coming externally, because you have to think about it, right? They're pulling somebody into an organization, meaning that they have to wine and dine them. They have to give them the offer that they feel is really going to bring them in. Versus if you've been there 5 years, there's no incentive for the organization to keep you there longer. You and I may feel like that's the case because we've committed ourselves to the work. We've worked really hard. We've grown. We've done all the politicking. We've done all the networking. And in theory, that makes sense. In fact, there was a time where you could stay at an organization and you got benefits at the end of the day, or you had retirement, or there was incentive to stay at an organization for a long time. But I the sooner that you realize that a lot of organizations, those incentives are gone, the sooner that you can start self-advocating in your own internal locus and ensure that you are making the moves you need to for yourself. So if you're applying to roles internally and they are blocking you, if you're applying to roles internally and they are not giving you rationale as to why they're not scaling you, do not wait, because they know that they've got you. They don't have an incentive to promote you much further, especially if they're not giving you feedback. Some organizations will tell you either directly or indirectly what it is that they need or what it is they're looking for. So that can give you direction as to where your next move needs to be. But do not wait, because the longer that you wait, the longer that your perceived shelf life at that organization is going to feel. And again, the perceived gaps on resumes and so on, or the lengths of stay at certain organizations, if you've been at an organization for a year and a half, that's a long time, especially in this market. It's a long time. It's something to be proud of that you stay there. Professional development budget, if they're not giving you opportunity to reach the goals that you see for yourself, move on and start that plan, because that feedback that that leader gave me, Beverly, in order to grow up, you need to grow out, has helped me in so many situations where I was at organizations where they thought I should be happy to sit in certain roles for years and years and years, and I should be happy to have certain titles, when I knew that after a while I had outgrown those spaces and I wasn't being challenged. I wasn't being challenged. And first and foremost, going back to my goals, right? I want to be challenged. I want to be that strategic leader. So that's really important. I have a question here. Could you explain how to perform cost benefit analysis on your career? Wow. What a great question. Absolutely. I am happy to do that. And thank you so much for your question. So, I'm going to show this here. Could you explain how to perform cost benefit analysis on your career? Okay, so first and foremost, I want you to calculate your base and your floor. This is a methodology that I've discussed at different points. And if you actually go to my website, beverlydines.com, I have a C Suite Secrets interview playbook where I have the calculator for your base and floor that you can grab within that documentation. Your base is the something we're going to come back to. Your floor, though, right? So if you are trying to perform a cost benefit analysis on your career as a COO, the first thing you need to do is calculate your floor. What are your base level expenses that you need in order to keep the lights on? I'm talking rent, I'm talking car payments, I'm talking insurance, whatever it is, are those base level expenses that you need to keep the lights on. Your now those are your that's your floor, right? Which means you can't go below that. This is an important metric when you're doing cost benefit analysis for a couple of reasons, and we'll come back to them. The next thing you need to calculate is your base. So that's for lifestyle expenses. Your subscriptions. Maybe you travel twice a year and that's important to you. Maybe you're in intramurals or you play an instrument, whatever those things are that are important to you, that are good for quality of life. Calculate that as well because that becomes your base. Now, when you are performing cost benefit analysis on your career, I want you to evaluate over the course of your career, right? When you think about your salaries, put on a sheet of paper. All you have your base and your floor, and you're going to put that to the right. On the left, I want you to look at the salaries that you've had over your career. And then I want you to look at, let's say starting from the very beginning all the way up to where you are now. What was the salary that felt like it was the salary that was in most alignment to you? Because you may have a calculated base and floor here, but you look at the numbers and you go, wow, when I was at this salaried amount, I felt more freedom. I felt empowered. I felt like I was able to move around more. I felt like I was able to save or invest. I felt that. That is important because that becomes your new benchmark and it becomes your new base. A lot of times we underestimate our own value. We often underestimate our own needs. And so we may have a number in mind or we may have a cost benefits perspective in mind, but the reality is, when we go back and look at our salaries, ooh, actually, when I was making this much, I felt great. Then what you're going to do, right, is you're going to ask yourself, what was my title? What was my role? What were my responsibilities? What was expected of me when I was in those roles? Because this is the next thing you're going to do, right? You're going to take that title, take that actual base, right? After looking at your career thus far, you're going to take all of that data, and then you're going to ask yourself, right? When I am making decisions about my career, am I making decisions from a lens that is going to benefit me the most? If I know that this is the salary I cannot go beneath in order to feel that freedom, feel appreciated, feel respected, feel poured into, whatever it is, right? Why am I entertaining roles that are beneath that? Why am I entertaining roles that aren't in alignment with that? The same thing, because I've already proven I can do it. If you have gotten a salary at a certain point and you are accepting less than what you deserve, you have to remind yourself that you got that original salary for a reason, which means you are capable of getting it again, right? So if you got that salary before, you can get it again. Then the next thing is, what was that title? What were my responsibilities? What was I doing? Those become your non negotiables when you are doing a cost benefit analysis of opportunities you are pursuing. If you are actively looking for, job opportunities right now or pivots, right? And you are looking at those job descriptions, the first thing you need to do is go, okay, what role, what responsibilities am I going to have in this role? Because as you are doing that cost benefit, well, maybe they're paying me a little less, but I am doing the things that fulfilled me. I'm doing the things that challenged me. I'm doing the things that excited me. That is going to enable you to think more strategically in that interview process about how you're going to move versus throwing whatever at the wall or just trying to pivot to get out of your current situation. In the inverse, right? If you're looking at a job opportunity and it's the salary that's in alignment for you, but you look and you say, well, I'm not really doing a lot of the things that I really enjoy doing. If I were in this role, I'd have the money, but I'm not really going to be challenged in the ways that I'd like to be challenged. That is where you actually start that real cost benefit analysis. And can I sit in a role where I'm not being challenged, but I'm making money that gives me breathing room? Is that something that'll be fulfilling for me, or will I leave that opportunity within the span of a couple of months? And then from there, right, maybe you can break it down even further. Maybe there are some non-negotiables within the job description where you're like, nope, no matter what, I need to I have autonomy, or no matter what, I need to be leading people because that's a really important part of my methodology. You write that down and make it plain. Write it down, make it plain. Y'all, write it down, make it plain. Because when you write it down and when you make it plain, when you are navigating the interview process, you are going to know very clearly as you're asking questions, as you're investigating, as they're, asking questions of you, you're going to know where your lines are. So then when the offer comes, because it's coming, especially if you're in the interview process, it's coming. Okay. When it comes, you then can look at your data. So we now have the true base. We now have the true job description that's actually going to fulfill you. We now have the metrics, right? You pulled the floor and the base. You pulled all of these previous salaries you've had, those job descriptions, everything. You now have the data, right? So when you're looking at this opportunity, you can take a step back and say, okay, I think that this is an alignment. I may be making a little bit less, but the title is better. The job description is aligned with where I want to be. And I know I'll be challenged. Okay. I am willing to take a little less knowing that these are the outcomes that I'm going to have. And in inverse, I'm making a little bit more. It's an alignment with where I know I feel freedom, right? But I'm not maybe going to be as challenged. However, it meets my non-negotiables. I'm going to be leading a team. My title is of a certain category. Okay, I'm willing to forego some of the autonomy maybe or some of these other non-negotiables you may have. As you are, as I move forward. As you are doing that, then you are continuously analyzing in the position. If you are somebody who genuinely cares about your career growth, you have to treat your career as if you are a company within yourself. So what do companies do? They not only do cost benefit analysis, but they also track their own metrics. I am a chief operating officer. So much of what I do is tracking metrics at a company level. The moment I determined, and this was earlier in my career where I realized, wait, I have to track my own metrics because companies can say whatever. They can say whatever they want, but the data never lies. So if your company, let's say you made this decision, you have said, I'm going to take a little bit of a lighter salary because they said they're going to develop me. But then after 6 months, they say, well, listen, we don't have it in the budget. We think you're really great. Let's get back to it in 3 months. You document what they said they needed to see from you. You document in your metrics tracker. Go to my website, beverlydines.com. I have trackers and I have a class that walks you through exactly how to do this, right? You map it out. And then in 3 months comes, they still are playing in your face. They're saying, oh, well, we know we said we were going to promote you. We know we said we were going to do this particular growth outcome. Document that again. The metrics never lie because here's where it really gets tricky. When you are doing a cost benefit analysis, feelings come into play and recency bias comes into play. And companies are expecting you to only be playing by your feelings because when we feel slighted, if you have ever felt slighted at work, and you have ever felt like you are not receiving the respect or the promotions or the opportunities you feel you should, trust and believe your organization knows that. As a COO, they know that you aren't feeling great because it carries. It carries as we're in meetings, it carries, we're humans, right? And so then you're going to beat yourself up because that's what they want. They want you to beat yourself up so that you feel like you're not meeting expectations or they keep moving the goalposts for a reason, right? The sooner that you are looking at the data and go, wait a second, these are the metrics that I have consistently hit throughout my career. These are the ones I've hit at this company. I've exceeded expectations here. I know that I've hit these metrics over here. They told me I needed to improve this. I have since created systems so I can improve over here. I know this because the data doesn't lie. So if they're telling me one narrative, but the data is saying something else, you've got to trust the data. And the moment you do that, your cost benefit analysis becomes a strategy for you to get out of there. Because then the benefits start to lower, right? They start to be they start to not make sense in relation to the cost. Okay, yeah, I'm being paid well, but now I'm really starting to feel the weight of 3 other people's jobs that they refuse to fill and they keep pushing that down the road. I'm starting to feel the weight of that. Document that. That becomes a new metric for you. I don't feel comfortable working at organizations where I'm doing 3 people's jobs. So when that happens at the next company, right? If you're somebody who has experienced having to do 3 people's jobs and that has felt overwhelming for you, document that that is a non-negotiable for future opportunities. So when you are in that position again and you're looking at your metrics tracker that you've downloaded, right? You can say, "Oop, wait a minute, I've been here before. And I know that if keep staying in this, I will feel unfulfilled. I will feel like I'm not being appreciated. I will feel tired. I will feel rejected. Maybe I'll feel depressed. Whatever comes up for you, you have metrics to remind you when feelings fail. So those are some examples of how you can do real-time cost benefit analysis in your day-to-day life, at work, but also preemptively before you head into a new organization, before you pivot, before you interview, assessing, what are the true costs and benefits. We don't often include our mental health and our own experiences when we think about cost benefit in our career. We often explicitly focus on money and access and stability and all of the things. We don't often consider, what are my thresholds in that cost benefit analysis. So if you are somebody who is actively doing a cost benefit analysis in your career, make sure that you are including your mental health in that. Make sure that you are including where were the times where I realized that I wasn't taking care of myself because I was so overwhelmed doing three people's jobs, or I stopped eating consistently because I was constantly working late, so I kept missing dinner, and then I was missing breakfast because I was sleeping in. Where were the times where I had time hogging at night, where I'm now scraping and scrolling and doing whatever, and I'm staying up super late because I feel like my time has been stolen during the day. Parlay that into your process when you're doing your analysis, because as a COO, there's been so many times where I have not done that and it creeps up on you. So you look around and you realize that you're exhausted, you're tired, you're frustrated, and you don't know why. You don't know why you're angry. You know it's the job, but you don't really know why. When it really is a death of a thousand cuts, but you don't know where those cuts are hitting. And the sooner that you document that, the sooner that you can prevent those cuts from happening to begin with. Thank you so much for your question. It was an excellent question. So that is really, really important to think about. I'm checking here on Instagram for questions if you have them. Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here. 'Cause but it is super, super important that, that you are including all aspects of cost benefit in your process, because it's deceptive. There are deceptive costs that we don't often factor because they're not on paper, which is why you got to put them on paper. Period. Yes. I'm just checking out the comments now. Any questions? Any more questions? Otherwise, I can pull some. Okay. So let me see. Yes, if you are looking to track your own metrics at work, please head to my website, beverlydines.com. I have a class called Avoiding a Corporate Crash Out, Tracking Your Own Metrics, where I walk through for an hour how to do this accurately so that you are able to be in a position um, to track them in a way that's going to be beneficial for your career. And in that class, I include the tracker, I include the deck. There's so many resources. So go and grab that at my website so you can start to track your own metrics. Here's another question. Let me pull this down. Thank you so much for your question. Can you share when your role name changes within an organization after pointing out the original role title average salary is way more than what you are given? Are there any legal ramifications? Interesting. So, from my understanding of this question, they changed your role because you pointed out that the original role that you had a salary that was higher. Um, if you have if your organization has changed your job description or your title, um, in a way to avoid having to pay you what you are worth, you absolutely need to start documenting. Because here's one thing that employees don't realize that they have protections for. If you've been hired in a particular role and that role has a job description, right? And you are not doing that job description. Title aside, you are not doing that job description. They have you doing other things outside of that job description. And then later on, they reprimand you or they fire you for things that are not on the job description that was outlined. You absolutely can contest it. This is where a lot of seedy and shady leaders and companies will try to get employees caught up is if you outline to them, hey, I'm noticing I'm doing a lot of responsibilities that aren't on my job description. This really, can we get a new job description for me? Can we make sure that this is in alignment? A lot of times they will say no. They will be like, no, we want to keep it nebulous because we want to ensure that XYZ, they will move you down the way because they don't want to tell you what that is because they know that they'll have to hold accountable to it. So that is a red flag for you that if they do try to terminate you, that could be grounds for wrongful termination because they're terminating for you for something that wasn't even your job to begin with. But let's say this situation, right? If you have been in a situation where your company has changed your title because they do not want to pay you appropriately, first and foremost, get the heck out of there. Get the heck out of there. You may have already started your process, who's asked this question. You may already be in that system of like, yeah, no. In regards to legal ramifications, that is a little bit harder to, and I do want to stress, I am not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice. I would absolutely recommend a quick consult. From my understanding of employment law, businesses can change titles and change whatever they want for whatever reason. Whether it's ethical or not really is the question. And I really wish that as a community, especially for leaders, we would have more conversations about ethics because ethics standards are not consistent. In medicine, there's do no harm. In other spaces, it's supposed to be serve and protect. There's there's supposed to be standards, but in corporate, it seems to be, at the whim of whatever folks are feeling, pettily or not. And so you did a very honest thing. You said, wait a second, there's something that's not right about my current situation. I'm not being paid what I should be paid for this role. And their response was, oh, we'll just change the title then so it's in alignment with where you are right now. If your job description is the same, but they just changed your title, you absolutely should start documenting that right now. Because if they are wanting you to do and if they changed your title without recourse, they changed your title without rationale, you can prove that it's in direct retaliation of you advocating for yourself. I would absolutely start compiling documentation now and then taking that storytelling of, listen, I came in at this title, at this pay, at this job description, and this is what I was doing. When I reported to leadership that this was out of alignment, and especially if you can prove that there are others at your organization who have similar titles to what you did have who were making more, that also aids your situation because if you are the only woman in your department, if you're the only person of color in your department, you're the only person who's LGBTQI plus, if you are of a marginalized background and you're the only person in your department who's being paid significantly less than everyone else, and then when you approach it to them, right, get that documentation, and they say, oh, we're just going to change the title, that could be perceived as a retaliatory act. And per the EEOC, if you can prove that there's a pattern of that per your protected class, you absolutely could pursue legal ramifications to your organization. So start looking at the full picture. I think, if they're just a-holes, for lack of a better way to say it, and they're being unethical, then unfortunately, like I said, a lot of businesses, they can change whatever they want to do. But now your real concern is if they've changed your title on a whim, but you're still doing the same job, that's how they feel about you. They're telling you that's how they feel about you. Because the right answer would be like, you know what? You're right. This is below average. And if you've advocated to your company about better pay and their response was to reprimand you or to gaslight you or to shift you, they are telling you how they feel about you. And so your best bet is to say, okay, I now am equipped with information. I've discovered that I should be paid more. I've discovered that I actually should be in a better position. Them changing your title only helps them, because then they can feel better about not paying you appropriately. But what you need to do is you need to keep that previous title on your LinkedIn, keep it on your resume, keep whatever the highest title was, and start making your plan to get out of there, because they did that. They did that on purpose. So compile your documentation, compile the storytelling of, what your department makeup looks like, compile the narrative that you're doing the same amount of work, you're doing the leadership work, you were brought in for a certain title and they changed it arbitrarily. Also, because if they didn't change anyone else's title but yours, again, this could be a potential pattern of retaliation. And if you're of a protected class, absolutely, you could potentially bring that to the EEOC if you can demonstrate a pattern. So, compile all of your documentation. If you want to work with me directly, you can go to my website, beverlydines.com, and book a session with me and we can take a look. But also, of course, from the legal side, because I am not a legal provider by any means, you can also have them assess and see if you have a case. Unfortunately, though, and this is something that I get questioned about a lot, and thank you so much for your question. I get questioned about this a lot, is, why won't lawyers take my case? I am experiencing discrimination at work. I'm experiencing harms at work. Why won't the lawyer take my case? If you are somebody who is experiencing harm at work and you are struggling to find a lawyer for your case and they are telling you that the only way that they will take your case is if you are fired, you are not insane. That is Here's what's happening. As a COO, a lot of the reason why, and my experience, having seen both sides of the table of this, right, is the reason why they won't take the case until you're fired is because that is considered a very distinct and direct act from a organization that they can then prove, plus the pattern of documentation that you've compiled, and then they fire them. That is a very finite act. Everything else can feel very nebulous, especially because documentation is often very inconsistent. The reason why I keep harping on the value and importance of documentation is because a lot of folks come to lawyers, they come to HR, and I point to myself because while I am not a HR professional by trade, I have led HR departments. So I have had to field a lot of HR complaints. And I will tell you that a lot of times people come to the forefront with concerns relating to whatever it is that they're navigating, and they don't have documentation that can hold up in court. And the company knows that. So if you are somebody who is actively experiencing discrimination right now, you're actively experiencing concerns at work, you're actively experiencing things, I cannot stress enough, prepare documentation that can hold up in court. Third person, dates, times, patterns. Patterns are the win. And you can go to my website, beverlydines.com. I have a class called Dealing with Bullies at Work that walks you through what protected classes per the EEOC and federal and state guidelines are protected so that you know how to fight back. Documentation templates. I even have case studies as well. Educate yourself so that you can fight back, because that is also a big reason. And from my experience and from people in the legal community who I've met throughout my career who have said that they will get this documentation and there's no patterns, there's nothing that they can work with. So when the company fires you, which is incredibly disruptive, right? Because if you are somebody who is actively navigating discrimination in the workplace, or you're actively navigating harms in the workplace, and you wait until they fire you because a lawyer told you so, and you haven't been compiling documentation of the patterns of retaliation, discrimination, everything else that's been happening since you went to that lawyer, that hurts your case anyway. And so when you go back to that legal team and you say to them, hey, okay, I've been fired, what now? But you don't have documentation of the pattern of discrimination. Well, you're the person who's SOL, and they just go, sorry. So it's only half of the story. Before you go to a lawyer, and definitely before you go to HR, have your patterns at the ready. And that documentation system is available at beverlydines.com. I've made it so easy for you, and I walk you through it. I walk you through in a class so that you don't have to navigate that alone, because that's what they're expecting. They're expecting you to not have proper documentation, because unfortunately a lot of folks don't, because they don't know how. It's not your fault. No one teaches this in school. No one teaches this in college. And if you don't have mentors, if you don't have people who've experienced this, or if this is the first time you're coming across my page, you may not know. that you don't have right documentation. You might have your storytelling, but the patterns are the most important thing. And so definitely head to my website to grab that class so that you can equip yourself and educate yourself. Um, it's really, really important you do so. Any other questions for today? Thank you so much. I was told by a prior manager that was laid off that I should be a project manager. Got my cert. I'm still in a coordinator position for 4 years now. Oh yeah, it's time to transition. Big time. Big time. Big time. Because you got your cert, it's time to go. And there's a lot of organizations that'll be super excited to have you with that certification. So absolutely. Mhm. And make sure, y'all, if you are just joining, that you click subscribe, that you follow. I'm going live a lot more frequently so that I can reach folks. And especially if you're on your way to work, you're at work, or you're, navigating your day, you can also refer back to these videos on my YouTube because I am recording both. I'm streaming live both on YouTube and on Instagram, and we'll save those videos so that you can come back and look at these to take notes on strategy. But please subscribe and follow if you're watching on Instagram so that you can continue to stay in the loop. Um, let's see. Any more questions? Let me put that back up. I love the little graphic at corporate Q&A. Corporate coffee Q&A. And it's funny because I don't really drink coffee like that. I'm a big tea drinker. I love a nice coffee, but love this. Planning to book a call with you soon. This was so helpful. Appreciate what you're doing, especially in this climate. You are most welcome. And I look forward to working with you. And those, for those who are wondering, because I know there's a lot of folks in this space who are offering consultation, offering support. Somebody mentioned this to me the other day who did book with me and felt like I should mention this out. So I'm going to say this as well. What's really different about me is that I am a tactical resource. I am somebody who is going to give you a roadmap. I always provide documentation following every session, especially if you book a package with me, you also get to keep the Zoom recording so that you can refer back to our discussions and listen to them and refer to them. So I am really, really big on documentation and roadmaps and action items. I'm a big tactical support. So we will not be spending the majority of our time yapping. It is strategy, and you'll be walking away with real tactics every session that you book with me. And that's something that's really important that I want to emphasize because I know that there are a lot of people in this space who have made a lot of money by yapping. I had somebody who told me recently that they worked with another career coach who spent 90% of the meeting just kind of talking and 10% giving tactics. And I'm going to ask you to flip that and reverse it with me. It is going to be 10% me getting intake. That's why so much of my pre-intake process is getting information from you so that when we are sitting in this room together, you are walking away with stuff to hold on to. Okay. Real tactics. So if you'd like to work together, please book a session because I look forward to meeting you and supporting you however I can. Um, you are amazing. I've been sleeping on your page. I have been at my current job almost 5 years, but I invest time in my community and have a second job. Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind. Listen, life is life, and people have lives, you got stuff going on. I just appreciate your support and being here. And listen, if you've been at your job almost 5 years, but you also have a second job and you're investing in community, you're like a lot of folks, you're hustling. And I appreciate being a part of your journey. You are so right. It took me almost a year and 8 meetings with HR to get a win. Listen, those patterns, I'm telling you, it's huge. It's huge. Patterns are huge because you have to be able to communicate those patterns. And a lot of folks don't know to do that. They don't know how to do that. And you can grab that at my class, at my link in bio. any more questions for today. And thank you all so much for your questions. I wanted to start some morning chats to see if this was a good opportunity to connect, and I see that it is. So I'm excited. I'm excited for us to continue to grow together. And like I said, if you haven't already, please hit that follow button on Instagram. Please hit that like and subscribe on YouTube and comment as well, um, so that, this can reach as many folks as possible who also are looking for support. Ooh, okay. So, hello. I have heard sharing your salary is not against HR policy. If that's the case, why is it so taboo? Thank you so much for this question. Um, if you are at a company that makes it feel like you are taboo for sharing your salary at work, here is one reason from a COO why that's the case. The reason why they don't want you telling your salary at work is because they don't want other people knowing how much they are paying other people, in the fear that people will start asking questions about why they're not being paid a certain amount. For example, I worked at an organization where this happened. People started talking about what they were making. They were at similar statuses, or worse, they were at higher statuses and somebody lower than them was making more money, right? Well, you tell me how you're going to feel having worked at an organization. You have a certain title, and somebody who is of a lower title than you, or a similar title than you, is making 20,000, 30,000 more than you. Are you going to feel motivated to work at that company? Are you going to feel appreciated? No. You're going to have questions. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be angry, maybe, because especially if you've been at that organization a while and you've been advocating for raises, this is often especially tense when you've been advocating for raises, right? So you're like, wait a second. People are now starting to talk. That is a company's worst nightmare. Let me actually back it up. Let me back it up and reverse it. It is an unethical company's worst nightmare for people to start talking about salaries. Because if you are talking about salaries, that means that it's going to open the lid on their negotiation practices. Um, if you are a leader who wants to ensure that you have negotiation room for your organization, but also wants to ensure that it's ethical, you have to create salary bands. You have to create standardized systems. When I worked in tech, and I've done this in other industries as well, I completely revamped and remounted and built on my own a systematized process that included salary bands for this exact reason, so that when somebody came into a position, right? Let's say you come in as a junior level sales associate, right? You know, coming in, that there is a window that you can wiggle in when it comes to raises, promotions, bonuses. So if you come in at the top of that, right? Goes back to leadership training. If you bring somebody in at the top of that and they've been crushing it for a year, they may not realize that the only way they can get a promotion is by being or get a raise is by being promoted. But if they're not ready to get promoted yet, then they're going to be wondering why they're not being paid more or getting raises or getting bonuses, but nobody's told them that they're at the top of that salary band. And so if you don't have bands to begin with, and you have leaders who are giving salaries arbitrarily, and then people start talking, if you start talking about your salaries at work, let me tell you what, it's going to expose a lot. It's going to expose a lot, and it's going to tell you very quickly if your company appreciates you and if they have ethical processes. Because if they have standardized systems, right, you're going to be able to quickly see, oh, okay, we're somewhat within range. We're somewhat within we're somewhat within. And there's rationale, right? Again, if there are standardized bands and someone's coming in at a higher band, well, okay, that makes sense. Maybe they have more years of experience. Maybe they have more specific experience with the specific need that the company has at that time. There becomes a rationale that makes sense for those decisions, right? But if they don't, and there's somebody who is of a similar title to you making double what you're making, they know that people are going to leave. They know that people aren't going to tolerate that. And unfortunately, for a lot of skeezy organizations, you know, They like that they've gotten you cheaply. Especially because if you are taking a salary that is low below what you need right now because you are in job transition and you are trying to make that a transition job for yourself, make sure you don't put a ring on that company because they know they got you cheaply. The companies know, take it from ACOO. They know that they got you cheap. They're looking at your resume. They're looking at what you're capable of doing and they're trying to hold on to you as long as you can at that price because they know they can't get somebody else at that price. So don't settle. Because even if nobody else is talking about salaries at work, if you know that it's a transition job, do not put a ring on it. Somebody said it's especially difficult to have salary discussions when working remotely. Yeah, yes, because if it is felt like it's taboo, if it feels like it's something that can't be discussed among employees and there can't be dissension about it. Now, I will say, and so an advocacy for leaders, it is very disruptive. It is incredibly disruptive to operations when people start complaining about salaries once that explodes. It is very disruptive because I will tell you, I worked at a company where this happened, where somebody blew the lid open about salaries, and this predated me, so this had all happened before I'd even gotten there. Not the situation hadn't happened, but the salary system existed before I got there. But now all these people are coming to my office furious because they found out what so and so was making and so and so was making and so and so was making and so and so. It becomes very disruptive because now you have choices. You as a leadership team can either placate to all of these employees who are angry and upset and hostile, which then will disrupt financial flow for the organization. It creates all kinds of bottlenecks and issues on the other end, right? Because people are thinking they're self-focused, right? Naturally, you're upset, you're frustrated. I want to make sure I'm validating. Like, it's frustrating to hear this because it happened to me. It happened to me. I literally was like, wait a second. Somebody is my same title and they're making this much. I am making this much. Why? They couldn't give me a clear rationale. Okay, yeah, I'm pissy too. But the tough part, right, is that all of that could have been avoided if proper and ethical systems have been put in place, which oftentimes people don't think about. This is why having a strong operator at your company is important. Do people think about human elements of the company as a separate part of operational process? When in reality, it is the most critical part of your process because if people are disgruntled, are they going to work hard? If people are angry at work, are they gonna care when there are fires at work? Are they gonna do their best? No. If people feel slighted at work, are they going to want to do that extra hour or work that weekend, be when they don't feel invested in it? No. Are they gonna wanna represent the organization at events or innovate at no, they're not. So if they find out that other people are making more money than them and they've been at the organization a long time, especially if they've been advocating and advocating and advocating and advocating and they've been given all kinds of reasons as to why they can't get a salary increase or whatever. No, it's going to be a slap in the face because that's what it is. That's how people internalize it because that's what it is. And so if companies don't have ethical systems in place for those salaries, there's that's what happens. It's inevitable. And that's why you feel and a lot of people feel like it's a taboo to talk about salaries because they know that a lot of these leaders who came in, they had all kinds of arbitrary reasons why they were making up numbers. Making up numbers. All these people are giving you advice about if people are giving you advice about making, your salary expectations based off of the market and based off of, and yes, I have even given this advice as well. Make sure you also operate with an extra 10 grand or 20 grand on top of that, because a lot of these leaders are offering and negotiating for internal raises and with their friends for numbers that they pluck out of the clear blue sky and then make you look crazy for asking for market value. That's why they don't want you talking about salaries because they gave their friend 30, 40, 50K increase, or they gave somebody they just happened to like in the interview process a 60, 70, 80K increase. And sometimes it's justified because of experience, right? That's the other tough part about it too. There have been times where I have had to tell an employee they didn't like to hear it. They didn't want to hear it. But there have been plenty of times where I had to tell an employee, this is not the situation you think it is. They may have the same title as you, but their specific focus, expertise, what we need right now, like there's a reason why they're making, 10, 20K more than you right now. You're at the bottom of the band and they're at the top of the band, but there's a reason for that. People don't like hearing that either. And seasoned leaders know that. Seasoned leaders know that when it comes to money, people often get very upset and frustrated or sensitive about that reality because frankly, most people are being underpaid in this economy anyway. So no matter what you say to them, it's not going to feel right. And um, but at the same time, a lot of people, if you've been doing this a long time, like I have, especially as a senior leader, you know that people will say they're going to leave, but they often don't unless there is some magnanimous reason or they have external factors that make them move or they finally get an opportunity. A lot of people don't. When would you have a conversation if there's a gap in salary? 5%, 10%. So this is a great question. I would recommend if you have identified at your organization that there is a gap in salary in comparison to other folks, what I would recommend is actually structuring your feedback to your leadership in relevance to your performance development plan. So, and not a performance improvement plan. This is different. Performance development, meaning you are looking to grow, right? Because the easiest and most effective way to get promoted and get a raise at work is to be promoted. It's the most effective way because companies can make bonuses happen arbitrarily. They can also take bonuses away. They can also make raises arbitrarily. They can also take them away. Being promoted is the most efficient way to get that increase. So if you see that somebody next to you is making a percentage more than you and they have a similar title, I want you to think, okay, what do I need to do to be senior to them? What do I need to do to get a higher title? What do I need to do here? What is the person who's above me or is in a more senior level than me? What are they doing? What are their skill sets? What are their certifications? That's the gameplay. When I mentioned earlier about in order to grow up, you need to grow out, that applies also to promotions. I need to be doing I need to build capacity for myself. I need to be doing more than what I'm doing now or do something differently than what I'm doing now. Maybe not necessarily more load, but different load than what I'm doing right now. So that's your strategy. Because then when you start doing those things and you start taking on those responsibilities, you then can approach after 6 months' time of you doing that, your supervising team and say, hey, I've been really dialed in here. I've been taking on these extra projects. I've been taking on these extra responsibilities, XYZ. I really love to talk about how I can, execute this roadmap to becoming an insert title here. Now, the focus is on getting you to that next title as well as that next raise. Don't nickel and dime these companies for small raises. Don't do that because the people who are thinking strategically about their careers, they are moving out if their company is not promoting them if not every year, every year and 6 months, every 2 years. And if the roadmap is not clear, then they're getting out of there because they know that it's stifling. So don't nickel and dime on 5% raises, things like that. Go after those promotions because that's where the real money is internally for internal opportunities when you're trying to move up. Um, and if promotional opportunities are rare, then it's time to move on. All right, last question for the day is do you believe it is mandatory to negotiate your salary? If you are not negotiating your salary every single time from a strategic framework, from a strategic vantage point, you are leaving money on the table. I cannot stress enough that 99% of people in my career do not negotiate. They think they're negotiating, but they're really not. What typically happens is that somebody will offer something to somebody and then they will respond with, thank you so much. Is there any room within the salary? They won't offer a specific number or target they're looking for. They won't put any other negotiation elements that are available like PTO or other, or 401k, any other negotiation elements. They'll provide a more nebulous, can we do more than this? So what is the company going to say? They're going to say no, right? But if you are coming to the table with quantifiable, tangible values that are in relation to now you've gotten all this information from the interview process. You now know what they're expecting of you. So you can take that number that you've had in the back of your mind about what you need. Again, that base and floor calculation that I talk about in my C-Suite Secrets interview playbook. I walk through exactly how to calculate this. And on top of that, on this platform, I've done so for free, how to do it. But on top of that, you also now see what's really going to be expected of you. So you tell me if you should negotiate every single time with quantifiable metrics. Thank you so much for even if they reach your expectations. This is the rub. If you receive an offer from an organization and it is within your salary band and it is within your range, if you don't negotiate that anyway, negotiate it anyway because they don't know. You might have told the recruiter what you're looking for roughly. You should still negotiate it because yeah, you might have been okay with 120K or 90K or 100K, whatever it is. But doesn't 130K feel nice? Doesn't 140K feel nice? You absolutely should advocate because once you do, you're setting a tone. You're setting a tone at that organization about what you will or won't accept. And what happens then also is it does impact your career growth potential. Because if you come in, I did an analysis earlier about employee A comes in, they are offered 90, they accept 90. Okay. Employee B comes in 6 months later for the same role, they're offered 90, they negotiate to 110. Just like that. There's now already a differential because now it's a mindset thing. When the next time comes for you to negotiate for another company, you're coming in at, well, it'd be great to have 110. This person's coming in asking for 130. Every time negotiate, every time. And if company says, oh, that's all we can do right now, that's great. And you are in a situation where it's a transition job, you have to make a covenant with yourself. Do not put a ring on it. A lot of people try to create careers from transition jobs. I'm raising my hand because I tried to create a career out of a transition job. And then I had to remind myself, no, this was never the intended purpose for this opportunity. You have to make that covenant with yourself. But a lot of times, especially if you are actively sitting in a role and you are interviewing for a pivot, you can wait. I promise you can wait. If you're already sitting in an opportunity, right? And you're looking to pivot, you can wait. Wait. Because there's going to be a company that'll be like, yeah, we can move up a little bit for you. Like, take the transition job as somebody who's had to take them in my career because life is life. And sometimes you really just need that check to pay the bills. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you are actively just looking to pivot for that new opportunity, you can wait. You absolutely can wait. I have had companies negotiate 50K more than what they were originally going to give me. $50,000 more than what they were originally going to give me because they were trying to play in my face. When they were like, "Oh, well, we really think you'd be great at," and I was like, "Excuse me? You want this title? You want this experience at the nope." And I told them as such, "I will not come to this team unless I'm making X amount." And it had to go all the way up to their board for approval. That's why I'm telling you, if they're serious, they will make it happen. And they made it happen for me. But you have to have confidence. You have to sit in that truth that I know what I'm worth. I've calculated it. I've calculated the metrics. Like, you got to negotiate. It's mandatory. And if it's an internal position and they're like, listen, we're not going to promote further from here, then that's also information for you as well to have on the back end on your radar. So that is all for today for Corporate Coffee Q&A. Thank you so much for coming in to the first one this morning. Amazing, 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 amazing questions. Thank you so much for being on. Like I said before you depart, like folks have been saying, right? Like if you're going to book a session with me, head to beverlydines.com. We can meet. Also look at my resources there. If you're not ready to, dip your toe into a full session just yet, you want to get a sense for my teaching style. I've got classes, I've got resources, I've got all kinds of goodies there for you to be able to use immediately. They are all instant access. So If you would like to work together, let's do so, because I look forward to supporting you tactically. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay warm wherever you are. Um, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next live. See you all tonight. Make sure you're here for Beverly's Break Room at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern for Beverly's Break Room. All right. Thank you all so much. Chat soon.